This is the Wednesday, April 28th, 2021 afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Good afternoon, Keelan. Could you please call the roll?
Good afternoon. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty. Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video or teleconference, and the city's made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. This meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to the council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. This pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, your flexibility, and your continued understanding as we manage through these difficult circumstances to conduct the city's business. We'll hear now from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good afternoon.
So I am not on the agenda, but I'll take over because I'm not seeing my colleagues. So good afternoon. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the city council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded.
Thank you very much. First up are items 290 and 291. Keelan, can you please read them together?
Amend Title 33, Planning and Zoning, to facilitate the provision of shelter and housing options for Portlanders in need. And item 291, amend City Code Health and Sanitation, Emergency Code, Public Improvements, Water, Property Maintenance Regulations, and Affordable Housing to facilitate the provision of shelter and housing options for Portlanders in need.
Thank you. Colleagues, over the course of last month, we've been working together to consider, move, and vote on proposed amendments to BPS's Shelter to Housing Continuum. Today, I anticipate that we'll be moving to adopt these two items as amended. Before diving in, I'd like to ask Bureau staff to provide us a summary of where we are in the process. And so with that, I'll ask Eric Engstrom and Director Andrea Durbin to chime in. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. We're excited to bring back the final materials you will need to consider the Shelter to Housing Continuum package. This is one of several significant zoning reforms that have moved forward in the last few years to create more housing opportunities for Portlanders. Last year, City Council adopted the residential infill project, which will go into effect this summer. Council has also adopted the expanded opportunities for affordable housing to allow churches and other institutions to use their property to create affordable housing. And we restructured the multi-dwelling zones with better housing by design to provide more incentives for affordable housing and improve the quality of multifamily housing. Next month, we will start the process for you to consider making improvements to the design review process, including creating more efficiencies and reliability for larger projects and waiving the need for design review for housing with units 4 or less. Taken together and with a group living changes in the Shelter to Housing Continuum, we have significantly expanded housing choices in Portland. I want to stress the continuum aspect of the project title. While we are trying to make it easier to site indoor and outdoor shelters with this project, The long-term goal is permanent housing. The Shelter to Housing Continuum project helps bridge that gap and provides a continuum of options we need to get community members off the street and the next steps toward permanent housing. I'd like to thank the public for their input and active participation in this process and their role in helping to improve this package. And I'd like to thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, and your staff for working together to problem solve with us to respond to the public's concerns and build more clarity and certainty into these rules. I also want to thank our partner bureaus for the collaborative work on this project. BES stepped up to help work out a more optimal sewer solution for tiny houses on wheels. BDS stepped up to identify barriers to shelters and help us understand how Title 29 works. PBOT stepped up by helping us understand how activity in the right-of-way fits into this project. And housing staff were part of the core team that helped craft the code. And the Joint Office, of course, helped identify the underlying strategy and desired outcomes. I also want to thank the Department of Land Conservation and Development for the grant that helped us get this work started. And lastly, I'd like to thank Al Burns, who served as the project manager until his retirement from BPS. And now I'll ask Eric Engstrom to summarize your next actions.
Thanks, Andrea and Mayor. I'll quickly recap where we are in this process and then outline the actions that we're asking you to take today. As you know, the Shelter to Housing Continuum package does four things. It expands where shelters are allowed. It adds a new type of shelter format, the outdoor shelter. It allows group living more broadly throughout the city and allows occupancy of RVs and tiny houses on wheels in certain circumstances. This will be your fifth meeting to consider the sheltered housing package. As you recall, you had a hearing on March 17th, deliberations on the 24th. You came back and considered several amendments on March 31st and then held a supplemental hearing on April 14th. Today, we're bringing you three things to implement your previously adopted amendments to the package and asking you to incorporate these changes before taking the final vote. Those three things are, first, we have updated as amended project reports, which are in 3 volumes. Volume 1 is a short summary report describing the project and has been updated to conform to the amendments that you adopted. It serves as legislative intent and further supports the findings. Volume 2 contains all the as amended zoning code text in strike-through and underline format consistent with the amendments that you adopted. It also includes commentary. Volume 3 contains the as amended text for all the other city titles, which include, as the clerk mentioned, titles 8, 15, 17, 21, 29, and 30, I believe. Also in strike-through and underline format consistent with your amendments. So that's the first thing, is to accept those substitutes. Second, we have a findings report which contains the analysis describing how the ordinance complies with state, regional, and local land use policy, and that's associated with the zoning code ordinance. And third, we have amended ordinances. There are 2 ordinances in the package, one for the zoning code amendments and one for the other titles. Each one has 2 effective dates, one for the shelter-related aspects of the project and one for the other elements, including the tiny houses on wheels and RVs and group living elements. The shelter elements would be effective immediately. Well, actually this Friday. We've asked for just a few days to make sure we can post the code to the website. The second element with the group living and RV tiny house elements would be on August 1 to coincide with the residential infill project effective date. Because of these 2 dates, the directives in each ordinance itemize which code sections are associated with each date. And so we had to make changes to the ordinance to implement the various amendments that you made, which added and moved a few sections around. So that's the changes to the ordinances, and the as amended version is the version that the clerk has posted to the agenda today. It's my understanding, based on conversations with the city attorney, that I think you can bundle these into 2 motions, one for each of the ordinances. So in summary, what we're doing is getting a motion for the changes I just described, accepting those for each ordinance, and then and I can walk through those again if need be.
So Eric,
And you do the final roll call.
can I see if I understood that? Can I see if I can walk through what you just said so I understand from a technical perspective what we're going to do?
Certainly.
So you would be seeking two motions, and stop me at any point when I'm wrong. One motion for item 290, one motion for item 291. So far, am I right?
Correct.
Okay, for 290, it would be substitute. Well, let's do it in the order you did it. It would be substitute the as amended volume 1 and 2, right? And it would also be substitute the as amended findings report, and it would be amend the ordinance to conform to the as amended version with the specific date. That's for 290. Is that accurate?
Sounds right.
Okay, and then for 291, it would be accept volumes 1 and 3, the substitutions for 1 and 3, and amend the ordinance to conform to the as amended version with the specific date for 291. Is that right?
That sounds right as well.
Okay, so what are you looking for from my colleagues? A motion one for each, first for the 290 and then for the 291?
Correct.
Okay, colleagues, unless you have any other questions, I'll entertain motions.
I'm sorry, 291 is what we're replacing, is that correct?
There are two ordinances. Item 290 is the first one, and item 291 is the second one.
I move we adopt 290 as presented.
And,
Yeah.
and just to be clear, these motions are the substitutions that the mayor just listed. You're not to the final adoption vote yet.
No, but we're moving to accept the substitution as presented by the mayor.
I see Lauren twinging, so let me.
I'm nodding in agreement.
I just want to make sure I understood. Okay, so what we're doing, the motion for 290 made by Commissioner Hardesty is that we would, and please, everybody follow along to make sure I've got this right, because I don't want to have to do it twice. Substitute the as amended findings report dated April 27th, 2021 as Exhibit A. Substitute the as amended volume 1 report dated April 2021 as Exhibit B. Substitute the as amended volume 2 report dated April 2021 as Exhibit C. And last but not least, amend the ordinance to conform to the as amended version dated April 21st, 2021. April 20th, 2021. Is that right, Eric?
If Lauren thinks so, I agree.
Yes, it's right.
All
I'm
right, that's
looking at
the-
Lauren too. Yeah, what he said, I said.
Okay, great.
That's
So
the motion.
Commissioner Hardesty moves that. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Rubio. Eric, would you like us to vote on these individually or put them both on the table?
I would defer to the city attorney on that question.
I think the idea was having it move as one motion, so you can do one vote on that whole, to amend the ordinance in one vote rather than 4 votes.
No, yeah, okay, so here, let me move on. So for 291. it's a
Oh, I'm
separate-
sorry.
Yeah.
So then that will be a separate motion. So there's
Okay,
two
so
motions.
let's put it all on the
two
table.
votes.
And we'll have a discussion. We'll answer any questions, and then we'll
Perfect.
come back and we'll vote. So
All right.
for 291, the motion would be, unless somebody else wants to make it. Commissioner Ryan, do you want to make it?
Sure. I move 291 as presented.
Very good. So we're accepting the
Second.
as amended volume 1 report dated April 2021 as Exhibit A. We're accepting the as amended volume, I shouldn't say accept, we're substituting the as amended volume 3 report dated April 2021 as Exhibit B. And we're substituting the ordinance, amending the ordinance to conform to the as amended version dated April 20th, 2021. Does that sound right?
It does. to
Eric's
me.
shaking his head yes. I'm hearing no objections. Nobody's jumping up in the back and saying, I object, Your Honor. So that is Commissioner Ryan's motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Commissioner Hardesty. Okay, so both of these are now on the table. We will discuss these. We will vote on these. And then Eric and Lauren, we would then have to, assuming we approve these changes, these substitutions, we would still have to vote on the core ordinances as amended, correct?
Yes.
Lauren is saying yes. Okay, good. Glad I had my Wheaties this morning. So colleagues, everything we've done so far, any follow-up questions, comments, thoughts, cartoons you'd like to offer to the public record? Keelan, on item number 290, as amended, call the roll. The amendments package related to item 290, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Well, a procedural question. I had my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ryan, procedural.
Yeah, well, it's just, I have a special needs moment here. So we have all these votes that we're doing. And when I go first, sometimes I make my comments at the wrong time. So I'm just trying to coordinate with all of you.
Hold off.
You're early.
This is not the last vote you'll be taking yet.
All right, someone, let me know when I'm supposed to make my comments. And then, anyway, so now back to making this vote here. Aye.
Hi. Don't feel bad, Commissioner Ryan. All of us are at one point or another mixed up where we were at any given time. So it's acceptable. Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye. The amendments are on the table for 290, for 290, or approved for 290. For 291, the package of amendments. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
All right, the amendments are adopted. So now we're down to the big show final votes on this. We will be voting first on the adoption of the as amended ordinance 190. Then we will be voting on the adoption of the as amended ordinance item 191. Do I need to make a motion, Lauren? I understand that as land use, these things can get squirrely, or can we simply call the roll?
You can simply call the roll, and I'll just clarify that's a typo in your notes. It's 290 and 291, but yes, those are the items. Yeah, and
I'm sorry. It is 290 and 291. I apologize. That is correct. Thank you very much. So we will.
Yeah, you can go ahead and call the roll on, and those would be 2 votes, and those are final votes and closing remarks.
Okay, so anybody who wants to give a speech, this is your opportunity. Keelan, first we're going to vote on item 290 as amended. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Ryan,
Okay, here we go. I'll thank you, first of all. Thank you, Mayor. And I'm just so glad that we've arrived at this moment. I'd like to thank everyone who's worked so hard on this issue. And in my office, Mark Bond, Zach in the mayor's office, Ricardo in Commissioner Rubio's office, Derek in Commissioner Hardesty's office, Adam in Commissioner Mapp's office, and Eric Ingstrom, and all the colleagues at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and all the other bureaus that were mentioned earlier by Director Durbin, who have engaged on this issue over the past year beyond. All the members of our community who have provided testimony. It was really strong testimony, and so many others. It's really remarkable to see what we really can accomplish when we all work together. Colleagues, we're at an inflection point, obviously, and we're facing this houselessness crisis. Right now, we face an unprecedented emergency on our streets. And as the number of chronically houseless individuals has grown, definitely at an alarming rate. Our current response is inadequate, as our work to site shelters has been hampered by restrictive zoning codes. Over the past year, we have made significant progress in standing up the C3PO shelters. Our ability to provide aid to those in need while adapting to the pandemic was an example of nimbleness and provides a glimpse into what outdoor shelter can look like. However, it's clear we need, as a city and as a county and as a region, a more comprehensive solution. Over the past 3 weeks, the City Council has taken a slow and deliberate approach to these code changes, ensuring that the public has had an opportunity to weigh in. These code changes will allow the city to have much greater latitude in siting shelters including both indoor congregate shelters and outdoor shelters with services. Additionally, under the most recent amendment adopted, institutional sites, which includes communities of faith and other community organizations, will be able to site up to 20 beds outdoors without initiating a review process. Last week, we also heard testimony about the barriers that permit fees can create when it comes to tiny homes and RVs. I just want to say that we heard you and that City Council is planning on holding a work session to address this issue. All these developments are critical to ensuring that we have the ability to meet the needs of our most vulnerable, but I cannot stress enough that this is only a first step in solving this crisis. Once we've completed this code change, we have to follow up by actually creating shelter options that meet the need. This could include alternative shelters like St. John's Village and the Kenton Women's Village, outdoor shelters like C3PO, and possibly even low barrier shelters similar to Hazelnut Grove. What is deeply encouraging to me is that the City Council is largely aligned in the belief that this emergency requires an urgent coordinated response. Between the Metro Supportive Housing Services Measure, the American Rescue Plan, there are options for initiating an approach that meets the urgent need we see in our communities. This is an all-in effort, which will include every member of this council, our jurisdiction partners, and direct service providers that contract with the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and we welcome those new partners to the table. Each of us and our entire city have to realize that we cannot continue the same strategies and tactics and expect a different result. We're going to have to lean in together and make choices that are difficult for all of us, but are necessary for the betterment of our entire community. I look forward to doing that work with each and every one of you. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Today, I'm very proud to be a Portlander. I'm proud to be a member of the Portland City Council, and I'm proud of the dedicated public servants who continue to think creatively outside of the box as we address the severe crises, the many severe crises that we're facing as a city. I want to thank Director Durbin for her thoughtful leadership, her continued thoughtful leadership. I want to thank Joe Zender and all the other staff who worked very, very intentionally, moving in when people pushed back, asking clarifying questions, making sure that we understood what the trade-offs were. As Commissioner Ryan said, we are in a crisis, and the crisis will only get worse if we're not using every tool available to us to make sure that we can help people where they are with some basic supports as we continue to build housing that people can afford to live in. The number one reason why people are houseless in Portland is because it costs too much money to live in the city of Portland. The data shows that $25 an hour is what people need to make in order to afford a one-bedroom apartment in a city. Many of the jobs that have disappeared around this economic devastation brought on by the pandemic were not jobs that paid a living wage with secure benefits that allowed people to be able to take care of their families. We have a multitude of crises that as a council, I have every confidence in my colleagues that we all are leaning in to make sure that we are not tied into what we've always done. As Commissioner Ryan said, expecting different results. I want to also speak to the public who will have to accommodate a new reality. And the new reality is that houseless people will be with us for a while. The question is, as a community, what do we do? Do we call 911 and demand that we remove them? Or do we go and try to figure out how we could provide mutual aid to ensure that people can survive on our streets? I want to be very clear. I don't want anybody living on our streets that doesn't want to. Anybody that wants a bed and a roof should expect that as just being a human being who lives in the city of Portland. But for too many families, working 2 and 3 minimum wage jobs still don't provide enough resources for first, last, security deposit, pet rent, and pet deposit. That is the reality of where we are. And I just want to be clear, this is not a quick fix. We will continue to develop new tools to address this severe humanitarian crisis that we're in. I want to thank Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Rubio for your leadership and for your leaning in ways that were necessary to actually unlock opportunity for people in our community with very limited resources. I am proud of the C3PO camps because they are self-managed. They actually address some demographic missing pieces that are in our current shelter system. I am so grateful for places like Dignity Village that continues to manage well. I'm saying to our community, we need all hands on deck if we're going to resolve the crises, this humanitarian crisis that we're in. And what that means is all of us are going to give up something. But all of us could get so much more if we all leaned in and did our part. We don't have to all do it all, but just our part. Making these land use changes today, what it does is provide opportunity for people to be able to live with dignity on our streets while we continue to use every resource to make permanent housing that people can afford to live in a reality. And in some cases with support services, because there are people who need those as well. I am proud to be a Portlander. I am proud to be on the Portland City Council today because this is hard work. If it was easy, we'd have fixed this crisis a long time ago. It's hard work, and it took cross-bureau collaboration. It took an open spirit about not, this is the way we've always done it. And it took the ability for us to have faith in each other. I have faith in you, my colleagues, that we share the same values. I have faith in you, Portlanders, that together, these next rough couple of years, we will be able to keep people living in dignity as we transition to a new normal. I vote aye.
Maps.
I'd like to echo some of the themes that my colleagues have expressed today. In particular, just a big thank you to the staff at City Hall, both BPS and OMF, for their hard work on this issue. Also, I want to recognize all the folks who testified on behalf of this project. Your comments definitely made this ordinance better. I'm really proud of this. I think it's going to be an important step towards helping solve our houselessness problem. And that is why I vote aye.
Rubio.
Congratulate my colleagues that we have reached the final point of completion for the shelter to housing continuum policy. And we're also just beginning in a lot of ways. We will need to continue working together to make real progress on the shared priorities of our city, of which housing and addressing the needs of our houseless neighbors ranks at the top. And although the continuum cannot end at shelters, we can't forget to adequately resource the initial efforts to find permanent sustainability for our houseless neighbors. And there are also outstanding conversations that the council will need to hold in order to continue making this policy implementation a reality. And my office will be working closely with Commissioner Ryan's office in holding a conversation on fee structures for potential appeals to making structures like tiny homes and RVs accessible, and especially to those that directly rely on that type of housing. I want to thank all the staff in each of the council offices for the dedicated time that they gave to this project. They worked very, very hard, and especially my staff, who also worked incredibly hard on this. Rico Lujan, thank you, Rico, for all your work and your time, and as well as Cynthia Castro for her insights and her work as well. I also want to thank the community members and the advocates that showed up with heart and ideas and provided testimony in shaping the final product. The engagement that we had from the community on this project was outstanding. And it also brought very important perspectives, and new ideas emerged from this engagement. And I hope to see that our community continues to show up and continues to help us shape future projects just like this one. And last but definitely not least, I want to thank Director Durbin and the BPS staff, BES and BDS and Parks Bureaus for your engagement in this and helping us have the information that we needed. And also a big appreciation to Eric Engstrom on maintaining an outstanding delivery of this project with a brand new council who had various levels of knowledge on zoning. So very big appreciation to you there, Eric. I'm very proud of the end results of our work today and proud to work along each one of you as my colleagues and also our teams and our bureaus on this project, and on behalf of our vulnerable community members who are deserving of respect and dignity and a place of their own. So I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, these ordinances give us the foundation we need to continue our work to address homelessness without the need to be perpetually relying on emergency powers. During our housing state of emergency, we have more than doubled the number of shelter beds we have in the city of Portland. There's another 800 people who have safety and stability they need to sort out the coexisting challenges of being houseless in a time of COVID. In expanding our shelter system, we learned two valuable lessons in ensuring that they're successful. First, we learned that success in bringing people inside is in part contingent upon the opportunity for people to remain where they feel connected to their community. You can see for yourself, just visiting all corners of the city, the need for shelter exists across all neighborhoods and throughout all corners of Portland. We need these critical resources and community assets distributed across the city. And the changes made with these ordinances give us the flexibility to do so. Second, we also learned that from people with lived experience, that traditional congregate shelters don't necessarily work for everybody. I learned this firsthand when visiting the Old Town Village, an outdoor emergency shelter that was set up last year in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There I had a conversation with a participant, Michelle, who shared with me that this style of shelter provided her with a strong sense of community and belonging that had been lost when she was no longer able to afford to stay in her own home. A critical feature of giving people hope and socialization that can serve as a springboard to finding work in a more permanent home. And so we're codifying in city charter these changes to allow this new use type, outdoor shelter. Successfully addressing this crisis takes the entirety of the community. And for that, I'm thankful to all who shared their testimony and their support of this project. I also want to recognize Bureau staff who've been shaping these projects over the past months and indeed years. When we directed the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability back in 2019 to develop a legislative proposal to create an easier path for siting and permitting temporary housing, shelters, and alternative shelters, I knew it would be a monumental undertaking, and it was. And I'm so pleased that this project created the opportunity for many city agencies to collaborate, to work together, and come up with solutions to a very complex problem. Amongst Bureau staff who've been heavily involved in this project from its origin, I wish to thank from BPS, Al Burns, Eric Engstrom, and Phil Namany From BDS, Terry Whitehill and Matt Wickstrom. From the Joint Office of Homeless Services, April Roman. From OMF, Johnny Lewis. And from PHB, Jesse Connor. I want to thank our Planning and Sustainability Commission for their deliberations and recommendations to the council this past winter. Thank you for helping us shape and support this effort. And I also want to thank council staff who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to help us with our proposed amendments. This was a lot of work. And I want to specifically thank Rico Lujan Valerio, Cynthia Castro, Mark Bonds, Adam Lyons, Derek Bradley, and Zach Curl and Stephanie Seraphy Allen from my office. Thank you all for your tremendous work on this. Last but not least, I want to thank my colleagues. This could not have happened without you and your strong political leadership and your willingness to hear from so many people, so many groups, so many organizations, and make something really positive come out of all of this hard work. Thank you, colleagues. I'm really proud to be serving alongside of you, especially at times like this. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. We'll now take a vote on item 291 as amended. Please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. Colleagues, our next item is a time certain, not until 2:45. We are in recess for the next 10 minutes. We will reconvene at 2:45. Our next item today is an appeal. It's item 292.
Appeal of Renee Mercado against the noise variance granted to Cafe Nell to add 2 speakers located at the corner of Northwest 20th and Kearney.
I will turn this over to the auditor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mayor, this is Keelan. I believe Paul Van Orden was going to introduce this item.
All right, great.
Paul, is that correct?
No,
I believe my manager at Civic Life, who is here, Michael Montoya, was going to just start off.
All right, good. Somebody, whoever wants to start, please go ahead and start. It isn't me, I know that.
yes, thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Thank you, commissioners. As was stated, this is an appeal of a noise variance. We have allotted an amount of time for each of the following people. I'll give you a general run of show. The first will be the noise control officer, Paul Van Orden, who will have 10 minutes to give an overview of the situation. And then the appellant, Renee Mercado, will be given 10 minutes to talk about her appeal. The variance holder will then respond. That is Vanessa Preston, approximately 5 minutes. The noise control officer will then clarify, add defining, clarifying points for a final 5 minutes, and then it will be up to you as to how you all would like to proceed. So if that's clear, without further ado, I will hand over to the noise control officer, Paul Van Orden.
Members of council, my name is Paul Van Orden. I'm the city's noise control officer. Thank you for the opportunity to explain this noise variance today and to have an opportunity for the community to have an appeal of the noise variance. The variance that is before City Council relates to 2 primary elements. The first one is a heater system, a temporary heater system at the restaurant facility that was being used in the pandemic to warm the tent up, and was initially a concern for the community. When we came out, the heater system was over the city code. We worked with the facility to mitigate the sound, and even after the mitigation, it was still over by a few decibels. And so that is the first component of the variance, is having a temporary variance to cover a few decibels over the code for an intermittent use of a heater. The second component in play is a set of speakers. The other complaint that the city's noise office was getting was concerns about speaker systems being used at this restaurant. The primary concern from the community was that the speaker systems were being left on when the staff at the facility left at night, and it would stay on past 10 o'clock. That issue was quickly resolved. And so the other part of the variance that was trying to address and collaborate on solutions for the community's concerns was administering the ability to use 2 small speakers that are on the facade of the building pointed into a tent-like structure, which I'll show you in a moment. And those 2 speakers were operating at a level of 55 decibels normally, which I'll explain. And in the variance, the extent of the noise variance was that they would maintain the average level within compliance to the code, but if the speakers got turned up at any point, they could not go over more than 4 decibels over the code, up to 59 decibels. And so the 2 variance components we're talking about are fairly nominal in terms of a heater system that was allowed to go up between 2 and 3 decibels over the code, and a speaker system that needed to be maintained at an average level of the existing city code. But if it did go up over code, it needed to stay within 4 decibels of the city code, up to no greater than 59 decibels. And if the auditor staff can open up the first attachment, which is an aerial map, I just want to point a few things out. I'm not sure how it'll pop up on my screen. And is council seeing the map? Because I can talk without having it open in front of me. Oh, there we go.
Now we see it.
The map depicts the neighborhood, and you'll see the red point fairly central to the photograph is the structure for the Cafe Nell. And you'll see in very close proximity to your right is a residential structure, zoned residential. You will see just to the north of the red dot a series of white rectangles, which are tent-like structures. That is the parking lot that adjoins Cafe Nell. For the purposes of our discussion today, it is a residentially zoned parcel in the city. And then just north of that is another residential structure that is fairly close to the parking lot structure. And so in this particular case, we're talking about residential zoning to residential zoning. And as you look through the neighborhood, you can see it may be hard to tell from an aerial view, but there's a mix of uses. There's a lot of residences. There are also some commercial establishments within close proximity. And so for the noise office, we are first and foremost primarily concerned about the zoning. And then secondarily, what are the use patterns in the neighborhood in terms of, is it a purely residential neighborhood or is it a mixed use neighborhood? And so all of those concerns are taken into account. And if the council clerk's office can open the second attachment, I just want to explain the nuances of the decibel levels very quickly. The chart that is going to open is from the city code. And if we slide up a little bit to the highlighted section, there we go. The part that I've highlighted just helps delineate that in this particular case, we're looking at a zone of source of sound coming from a residential property, and it is emanating primarily, the concerns we have in the noise office are for neighboring residential structures that are zoned residential. And so without a noise variance, they need to meet 55 decibels. And that is from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., which are the hours that we were talking about with the operator, that they would look to use either the heater intermittently or the speaker systems. So without a noise variance, both of those items would have to be maintained at 55 decibels. The level that we are administering a noise variance for was intended to find a way to find a midpoint that's reasonable and does not negatively impact the neighbors with excessive sound, but also maintains an opportunity for the heater system or the speakers to be operated by the cafe in this unusual circumstances, in this temporary circumstance of the pandemic. And so the level that we were permitting, which was maintaining it on average at the city code, which is 55, but the operator was required to monitor several times through the day. If the sound level got turned up too loud, it needed to be brought down right away, back to that average 55. And at any one point, it should not go over by the city code by more than 4 decibels. So for the purposes of the city council, the two items that we're addressing today relate to a intermittent use of a heater, which was just for days that were cold enough that there was a need to heat the tent up and then use auxiliary heating from the normal small propane mushroom-like heaters that heat at each individual table, and the utilization of the stereo system and only up until 9:30 at night. And so the final thing I want to mention to council is a noise variance can often be our opportunity to have an inroad to resolving community issues because we don't have tools other than enforcement that we can draw on. And so in this case, our hope in the noise office was to try to address the concerns the neighbors had brought to the table. And we were able to do that through the conditions of the noise variance because we would not normally be able to require a person to monitor multiple times throughout the day. We would not normally be able to require someone to not dump their glass and wake up neighbors. We would not normally be able to require set times to use a heater system. The sound levels in this case that we're administering are close enough that we would not move forward with an enforcement case if they were that close to the city code. So the noise variance gives us a tool to be able to try to keep things in check in a situation where we don't have an ability to send staff out to measure constantly and see if they're over the standard. And so our discussion today for council primarily focuses on these two elements, the intermittent use of a heater, to warm a tent up to a temperature to use quieter heaters, and the use of 2 small speakers on the face of the building pointed in the tent. And the last component I forgot to mention is that originally the operators were using a Bluetooth speaker that their staff could move around the tent and potentially move very close to the neighboring property lines. And so one of the other solutions built into the noise variance is that the routine use of these speakers for background ambient music was moved about 45 or so feet away from one of the primary neighbors where the sound could be pointed at and back against the building instead of very close to the property line. And so the noise office had felt that these were reasonable applications of Title 18, and I would be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time the council might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Van Orden. Now it is an opportunity for...
Wait. Commissioner Mapps had a question.
Oh, sorry.
I just have a quick clarifying question. Thanks, Paul, for that clear presentation. When does the noise variance expire?
It expires at the end of this month. So we had hoped in dialogue to have this before council earlier. And so we unfortunately are in a position where this particular variance will be finished in the coming days.
And do we know if the cafe plans to apply for an extension or a new noise variance? Or
you know, they are not. I do know that they're not using the heater, and since it's a temporary situation, hard to say that we'd be in this exact situation next winter. But at this point, I can't see that the heater would be an issue anymore. And in terms of the speaker system, that's a great point. I would imagine that the discussion today will probably set the tone if an applicant would reapply or if they would just work to maintain it at exactly 55 and below.
Okay, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
And now is the opportunity for the appellant, Renee Mercado, to give your 10-minute presentation. Thank you.
Hi, this is James Lorick. I'm a lawyer here in Portland, and I represent the Mercado family. I think Commissioner Mapps, you hit the nail on the head. This application, this variance expires if the appeal is denied. This variance expires by its own terms this Friday, and so we do think the Mercado family believes this issue is so important that they do want to address the full council and Mr. Mayor with these issues, but recognize that come Friday, this variance will expire by its own terms. Ms. Mercado has submitted excellent written materials. I intend to only highlight some of those issues as well as Mr. Van Orden's decision coupled with the applicable city code provisions. It should be noted that the Mercados moved to their single family residence in 2002. At that time, the restaurant was known as Cafe des Amis. It was a quiet restaurant limited to indoor activity, and it should be fully noted that the indoor activity by permit is limited to 49 patrons. In the last several years, of course, the restaurant has changed ownership to Cafe Nell. The Mercados were comfortable with the arrangement, the physical arrangement, knowing that there was a restaurant located to the south of their property, in large part because there was an empty, other than cars, parking lot between their house and the restaurant. And there was no evidence whatsoever, no history of any outdoor activity associated with the restaurant when they purchased their property. Sort of the root of the problem, and Mr. Van Orden mentioned it, but the root of the problem here is the illegal, improper conversion with no notice, no opportunity to be heard by the neighborhood of the parking lot. Mr. Van Orden is correct. It's a residential zoned parking lot. This is a residential neighborhood. And the parking lot has been improperly converted with no input from the neighbors to an outdoor but enclosed tent restaurant that frankly increases the capacity of this restaurant far beyond the 49, which is permitted by the underlying permit for that restaurant. So the underlying problem is, as you can imagine, the sheer volume of noise that's generated from a very active tent restaurant with a full bar going for long hours. On the weekend, it opens, I believe, at 9. It closes at 11. It should be noted that Cafe Nell expanded its hours to 11 from the original or previous 10 p.m. So all of this contributes to an extreme impact on my clients, the Mercados, and the adjoining neighborhood. But if you just simply count the number of tables and available seats in the tent, coupled with the outdoor seating along both Northwest Kearney and Northwest 20th, the number of possible patrons far exceeds 49. And adding 2 exterior speakers will only increase the noise level and the volume of the customers using the tent. They'll need to overcome this so-called ambient noise emitted by the speakers. And those speakers are, if they're installed, will be pointed directly at my client's single-family home. The Mercados have 3 children living at home. The youngest is 15. His bedroom overlooks the parking lot. With the noise from the customers coupled with the speakers, it's no surprise that he has difficulty sleeping, certainly doesn't sleep during normal family hours. It impacts his health. It impacts the health of the family. There is a condominium kitty corner behind Cafe Nell. Folks at the condominium expressed concern to Renee Mercado about the impact it's having on them. The neighbor to the east, which has virtually no setback from the restaurant, is a single family with children in that home. They're impacted greatly by the noise, the traffic, and adding speakers, which, by the way, haven't passed, as far as we know, any sort of design review. And this neighborhood is closely and heavily regulated when it comes to design. There's been no design approval for outdoor or exterior speakers. In fact, I don't think there's been design approval for the awning out front of Cafe Nell. But the Mercado family is very sensitive to the impact COVID has had on restaurants, and it has no objection to the interior use of the restaurant, and it has no objection to the additional tables along the 2 streets, but it has serious objection to the conversion of the parking lot. And they have filed a complaint that, for whatever reason, hasn't made its way through the complaint process at the city. I understand the city is considering some relief when it comes to zoning variances for restaurants, and we get that. But this is not Northwest 21st. It's not Northwest 23rd. This is a residential neighborhood. And all you have to do is go check out Serrata's and some of the other restaurants on 21st. I can't think of any other restaurant that I've been to outdoors that has any outdoor amplification or speakers. There's just no need for it. And it frankly just rubs salt in the proverbial wound of the underlying improper conversion of the parking lot. Now, let's talk about the technical non-compliance with the city code that this noise variance application is subject to. First, the application itself, which is part of the record, it's handwritten, it talks about this commercial heater, which is the emphasis, but if it expires this Friday, I mean, the weather's warming up, the heater's probably not an issue. But the speakers, and specifically the application for the speakers, it's not plural. If the application itself says one speaker, but more importantly, the notice to the neighbors doesn't even mention speakers. Of course, the city code 18.020, 18.14.020 lays out the factors that are to be considered. And it also lays out the process by which an application is made. And the fact that the notice to the neighbors does not even mention speakers is a violation that renders this variance improper. And even if you are going to consider the application as proper, it only talks about one speaker. For some reason, the noise officer has granted 2 speakers. That's a violation. The code section also lays out 6 factors that are to be considered by the city in granting a noise variance. Number 1, the physical characteristics, times and durations of the emitted sound. This is a residential neighborhood. I can't emphasize that enough. It's a very dense neighborhood. Allowing speakers to be mounted on the exterior of the restaurant will just add to the customer speaking louder. It's an improper conversion to begin with. So adding speakers to it, which will only increase the volume, is improper. Number 2, the geographic zone and population density. Again, this is a very dense neighborhood. Probably the best evidence of that is when Cafe Nell circulated the notice. By my count, they circulated or delivered at least 200 notices. There are a couple of apartment buildings. There's a women's shelter, kitty corner across the street. And then there are these 2 single-family homes right next to the restaurant.
Mr. Lord, you're running out of time.
Okay, I got 1 more minute. Thank you.
No, you're 1 minute over.
Okay, let me just wrap it up. If you look at the rest of the criteria or factors to be considered, it's having a health impact on the Mercados. There's non-compliance with the city code when it comes to the parking lot. There's no impact, there's no negative impact to Cafe Nell not to allow these speakers, and there's no demonstrable impact that it would have on their business without these speakers. So with that said, I appreciate the opportunity to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Before
I think Ms. Mercado now will speak. Don't we have a couple 3-minute sections there, Mr. Montoya?
At this point, it would be the opportunity for Vanessa Preston to give comments, but there will be opportunity at the end of everyone's initial presentations for subsequent testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any questions before we move to Vanessa Preston? Okay, Vanessa Preston, please, you have 5 minutes.
Let's see, can you see me? How do I turn my video on?
We can hear you.
You can hear me. I'm trying to turn my video on. Let's see. I don't want to share my screen. Trevor, oh, here we go. Start video. There we go. Can you see me and hear me now? Commissioner Mabs, Commissioner Hardesty, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Ryan, and who did I miss?
Commissioner Rubio.
Commissioner Rubio, thank you very much for your time.
And the mayor.
I said in Mayor Wheeler, didn't I? When I sat here a year ago and tried to figure out how we were going to survive an unprecedented situation, I had no idea that I would be sitting here today. I had no idea that getting creative and trying to figure out how to keep 35 to 40 people employed would create, and this is my employee Trevor sitting next to me, would create havoc within a neighborhood. We've been here for 12 years. We are an integral part of the community, and we have always been over backward to be neighborly. When we were allowed to reopen for outside service, I did not see any way that looking forward into an 18-month abyss, as I saw it, that we would ever be operating inside for 12 to 18 months. And at that time, I thought, what in the world are we going to do? And the adjacent parking lot that we had used for 12 years, I contacted the owner and asked if we could possibly operate outside. Would that be a possibility? And I came to an arrangement with them. The Liquor Control Commission, a state agency, sent out a permit form for operating outside. And the provisions of that permit were to have the permission of the property owner, and that the space either abutted, shared, or adjoined my interior space. Given the fact that I had permission from a state authorized agency under the emergency of the pandemic, it didn't occur to me that I needed to contact the city and get permission. I thought the state had given me that permission under these unprecedented circumstances. Now, looking back a year later.
Excuse me for a second, Vanessa. There's some noise in the background. I think, James, if you could put your thing on mute, that would be helpful. You're the only one I see that's not muted, so I'm not blaming you for the noise, but I think if people would just be on mute, we could hear the testimony. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Please continue. I still don't know where the noise is coming from.
It may be coming. We are sitting here in the restaurant.
Oh, it may be. You may be creating the noise. Okay, I was trying to make it quieter so we can hear. Thank you.
We operated outside then until, through September. And as the winter approached, I didn't know how we would make it through the rainy and cold winter, but the city, a permit was not required to put up a tent for 6 months that was under 700 square feet. As we approached winter and rain, I knew that we had to cover more area than that Otherwise, employees would be soaked. It just would not be possible. So at that time, I reached out to the fire marshal's office, and I obtained an event permit, and I obtained a tent permit. I drew up specifically how I intended to add more tents and cover the entire area, because I had to spend about $40,000 on tents and heaters. And I knew that I needed to have that approved. So I sent it over and I received approval for that. I spent the funds. And even though, again, looking into the abyss, I purchased propane heaters, and I thought, my gosh, like, I didn't even know how we were going to pay the propane bills. But I knew that my staff would still be working sometimes in 20 and 30 degree weather. And although I had purchased blankets that, we sold, and I had purchased fleeces for my staff to wear, I sought some avenue to, at least in an open area on days that it was 20 and 30 degrees, bring up the ambient temperature in their workspace a little bit so that they could work comfortably. My spouse works in construction, and he said there's got to be something, other than propane heaters. He said, when we're building a building, we have buildings on the inside. We have these heaters on the inside. So I researched, and I didn't get just a construction heater. I went to the premier company that makes heaters for events, for like weddings. So they are made to be quiet. I applied for a permit for electric and gas, and had the city come in and install that and put a heater on the back of the building so that I could pump some ambient heat for my staff to be able to work. And given the fact that I had, gotten multiple permits, I was blindsided when the neighbors were upset about this heater, which, frankly, if it had been loud, my patrons wouldn't have been able to stand it. But I began to receive calls from the city. The fire marshal's office came by, building services came by, because calls had been made to the city. So when Mr. Van Orden came over, I showed him the situation. He took a reading. He said, I'm going to ask you to build a temporary wall behind this to mitigate any sound. I had it built within, less than a week of his asking me to do so. It hadn't occurred to me that I needed to apply for a noise permit. He said, I'm going to ask you to also apply for a sound variance so that in the event that you do go over the 55 decibel code, that you are, we're taking care of that. So I did immediately as he asked, and I...
Ms. Preston, Ms. Preston, my apologies, but you are out of time.
Absolutely. Thank you. So thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
So now, unless there are questions pressing, is the opportunity for Paul Van Orden to add clarifying points to what we've heard.
And so I'm not sure if there may be additional questions after the council clerk introduces anyone who might want to testify potentially. I'm not sure if there's names of folks who've signed up. I think that's what Mr. Lowrick was mentioning. But the main point that I just wanted to share with the council is that the question of noise variances and what conditions we can set on them, whether it's the city's noise review board who has oversight of my work by delineating what variances staff review versus what variances go to a full public hearing. Those decisions we make in the quasi-judicial process are very open in trying to find ways to solve the environmental health issue of noise pollution. And so we have a lot of leeway to try and find solutions. And you'll notice in this particular decision that I've administered that it includes conditions like resolving issues with glass dumping. And so while there is a concern that has been raised about, are there too many speakers? Are there other concerns? The main goal of the city in administering this program is to find the best solutions we can for the community. So I just wanted to clarify that there is a fair amount of leeway in how we administer that to try and find that resolution. And that
thank you. Commissioner Mapps has a question.
Yes.
You're on mute, Commissioner.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Paul. I apologize for interrupting you. If you want to finish your thought, you can.
I think that was it. I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that noise variances are a unique situation in the city, like many land use decisions, in trying to look at the characteristics of each individual situation and best cater a solution to that situation.
Sure. And can you, an item which got brought up was the variance being for one speaker as opposed to two speakers. Can you help me think about that?
You know, in this case, we're talking very small speakers. And so my thoughts are, first of all, the decibel levels that I have been experiencing there have not been excessive from multiple speakers. So the challenge was more so with one speaker that can be moved all over the tent. It could be put right next to the Mercado's home. It could be moved right next to another home that's to the east, I want to say. And so the resolution of getting the speakers against the building gave us some distance to the neighbors, so there's better capacity to maintain levels within compliance or below compliance. So that was the thought process on one or two speakers, but getting them back against the building, not roaming around with staff who could potentially move it, which was actually the operator helped point that out to me, that, you know, staff could move these speakers, and that was a very good solution to keep it from being a sound system right up against the neighbors scenario.
And let's say that this council decides to support the appeal. Do you know when that decision kicks in? Does that like kick in today? Or is there a seasoning period?
You know, we might have to get a clarification from the city attorney's present. I would assume it could kick in right away. So if council were to say the variance is null and void, or if you change any component of it, which you are free to do, I would assume, and the city attorney can tell me if I'm wrong, that can kick in whenever you would like that to start. And it looks like Matt from the city attorney's office can help clarify. And I see Tony.
We have a stack. Mayor Wheeler, would you like to handle the calling on folks, or?
Yeah, that's fine. Commissioner Mapps, if you finish your comment.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is Commissioner Hardesty, and Tony has something to add.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you both Paul for your presentation, and as well as Vanessa, and I appreciate the Mercado family being here. My question is really for you, Paul. Are you providing these ordinances any differently based on the pandemic and based on our desire to remove obstacles to restaurants staying in business?
You know, this is such a unique time that I'm trying to take that issue into account, because it is a element that we have to consider on how do we best apply Title 18, because the limitations of both the restaurant and the impacts on the neighbors are unprecedented. So how do we apply these standards in a fashion that is equitable across the city, ethical and fair, and still recognize that noise is a human health issue, and needs to be addressed. So most definitely the pandemic sets the tone in a unique way for how we're administering things right now.
And Paul, I'm going to ask it again because for me, I just would you rule differently if we were not in a pandemic?
I would probably say that we would look at less days of being able to use amplification. So I might have, as we've done in many cases, said that, you know, you can operate inside. You know, we're going to allow you to do this on Fridays and Saturdays and have a vibrant atmosphere on Fridays and Saturdays, but multiple days is a bit much to ask for in a normal situation.
I appreciate that. And Paul, do you know, I had it up and I think I've lost it now, but I was actually surprised to know that there's been a restaurant on this site since 1982. And I believe this has always been a residential neighborhood, but for some reason in 1982, somebody allowed the restaurant to open there.
And is the question?
So the question is, the rhetorical question I was asking was, do you know how long a restaurant has been operating on that particular site? And I'd hope your response would be, yes, the first one opened in 1982.
You know, unfortunately, I don't know the exact first date. I tried to poke at that a little bit from the planning side, and I don't know the exact date. I do know that the
data that I'm reading from is actually from Wikipedia, right? And sometimes it's totally accurate and sometimes it's not. So I was just trying to confirm it with you. But I guess my point is that there's been a restaurant operating almost nonstop at that location since 1980s. And the pandemic, as you said, is something that we've never experienced before, especially at this magnitude. And so your decision would not have necessarily been different, but you took into account the pandemic, is what I hear you saying.
Yes, most definitely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I have a more fundamental question. This really doesn't get to the arguments one way or the other, but why is the council hearing this? This in my 4+ years is the first time I've heard a noise dispute. And I'm kind of curious as to why we're hearing a noise dispute.
Maybe because the auditor withdrew her permission for administrative hearings.
I can help answer that for council.
Yeah, because maybe I'll put it in the sidebar box for later. I don't want the council to end up being the noise code enforcement. That this is not a good use of council's time. Can you tell me how are we hearing this issue?
Absolutely, and the city attorney's office may correct me if I'm off a little bit, but when the noise code was written, which was back in 1976, my predecessor, Dr. Herman, helped craft a code that would allow for long-term projects, like construction projects that go on for a year or multiple years, that are serious and impact a large part of the population, to allow those decisions by the city's noise review board and noise officer to be appealed to city council. And in the 40+ years of the noise code, there have been very few appeals before city council. And so one of the things that is a challenge in Title 18 right now that I believe the noise review board would like to address and has talked about on a few different occasions is removing the more basic appeals that are not noise board and multi-year and big projects from city council's review and going someplace like a code hearings office. And it would also help with the Mercado's perspective of we want resolution. That would allow it to go before a code hearings officer in a much quicker fashion and not have something administered by city council unless it's a multi-year bridge rehabilitation project, highway project, something that's going to impact potentially thousands and thousands of neighbors. That's not to downplay the impacts of the human health issues here. It's just to say that the noise review board has said, and council may even have some guidance for them further on this as the board to the council on noise issues, that they'd like to see the more rudimentary variances that are administered at a staff level appealed not to council, but rather appealed to Code Hearings Office.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not belittling in any way the importance of this issue. I mean, for the people directly involved, this is a very important issue. And I want to be clear, that's not my point. My point is simply, I'm trying to figure out how we got put into the position of adjudicating what I think is a staff decision. So I guess the question I need to understand, since I'm going to be asked to vote on this, what criteria are we using here? When we do land use, we have very clear criteria by which we judge these issues. What are the legal criteria that we're using here in order to make a decision?
And that one I may leave to the city attorney's office so I don't miss something in that particular response.
Yeah, because I haven't heard yet on what basis we're supposed to make a decision here yet.
Sure. This is Tony Garcia, Mayor Wheeler, and Commissioners of Council. So this is an antiquated section of code, as Paul has sort of outlined, and we're here because this type of appeal goes to council according to code. And then code just does not have a lot of parameters on the procedures for overturning this decision. So council really has the discretion here to decide whether the wrong decision was made or whether code was applied incorrectly.
Okay. Marginally helpful. Thank you, Tony. So I will put aside my question, which is then, are you telling me that in 4+ years that I've been here, there has been no dispute or disagreement with Paul Van Orden's decision making? If that's, because none of these have come to the council, I don't think, since I've been here. So Paul, I got to hand it to you. You're doing pretty well under those standards. So given that the code itself, as you describe it, both quote antiquated unquote and unclear quote unquote, that still doesn't give me a whole lot to go on here except the judgment of the noise compliance officer, Paul Van Orden. Paul seems to be making a rational argument. I'll state the obvious since we're all thinking it, which is this sounds like it also could use some mediation, some neighbor to neighbor mediation. Renee, well, we'll get to test, enough of my, let's get to testimony and maybe somebody else can shed some light on this for me and for my colleagues. So 3 minutes each, name for the record. Keelan, I don't know how many people are signed up. Tony, what did you have to add?
Mayor Wheeler, I was just going to add that, I mean,
I can't hear you. It's all fuzzy.
For any appeal body, it is typical to identify where there was, can you hear me now?
Try it. It's better.
I will say there was
no, we can't. Tony, we can't hear you.
Appeal body,
Tony,
there's
you sound like you're on bars. I can't hear you. Sorry. I have no idea what you're saying. I'm sure it's.
Look at some error or misapplication of.
Nothing like this happening during a noise ordinance hearing.
Right. Tony, he put in a chat that he will put his response that he was going to say in the chat.
Okay, so I guess my question is this, since we haven't had a hearing like this, anybody can answer this who knows the answer. Renee is here. She would like to speak. I feel like we should give her the opportunity to speak. Is there an opportunity for people to testify? Do we have the flexibility to hear what she has to say?
Yes, the council does have wide discretion on that, and you can allow that.
Does anybody have any objections? I'm not seeing any objections. Renee, go ahead and keep it as succinct as you possibly can and still make your full point.
Thank you. And this is my daughter, Sophia, and my husband, Neville, and they also have a few sound bites that they would like to share. And we also registered for our 3 minutes, so I hope that we can all do that.
Of course, you got it.
I want to reiterate that this is a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood. The restaurant is on a residential lot. It has a conditional use permit that allows them to have 49 indoor seats. As you can see from the aerial photo, the parking lot is about 3 times the size of the restaurant. And I understand that we're in unusual times, but we are also dealing with this excessive noise from the patrons in our homes, in our bedrooms, and adding speakers only makes people talk louder. I don't believe we need music to eat or to enjoy our food or the beautiful space that Vanessa has created. I think that the speakers are excessive, and really what it comes down to are these facts. The application requested 1 speaker. The public notice had 0 speakers mentioned in it. So the neighborhood doesn't even know that the speakers were being asked for, which is a requirement. Third, the noise officer, Paul, granted 2 speakers without even letting the neighborhood know that we are going from 0 speakers to now 2. So I don't think we have any dispute over the industrial heater. The sound barrier seemed to mitigate that sound. The only thing that we are really trying to get you to hear us on is why the additional use of noise. Vanessa already has 2 speakers on Kearney, 2 speakers on 20th, and now 2 speakers pointed at my house. This, to me, excessive, and it's not necessary. And Sophia?
Hi, I'm Sophia. I want to start by saying I appreciate everyone taking the time to just listen to me today. It means a lot to be able to use my voice. I'm 19 years old. I've lived on 20th and Lovejoy my whole life. So it's safe to say that Nob Hill has really made me who I am, and I'm really blessed to be from here and live in this neighborhood. I want to start by saying that. I'm happy to see Cafe now doing more than just surviving during these challenging times. When this was being built, we were all really impressed, and it's amazing what she's created, but everything comes at a cost, and we didn't really, see that in the beginning. And unfortunately, I believe my brother's paying the most cost. His bedroom's closest to the restaurant. He has a window facing the restaurant that brings in all the noise. He's 14 years old, and like most kids right now, he's attending online school, and I believe that to be enough of a challenge as it is right now. So adding the sound of loud conversation, people laughing and cheersing in the background, glasses breaking, cars circling the block, honking their horns, trying to find a parking spot, the garbage taken out frequently. It's a lot. And I think that adding more speakers, it does make me anxious. It does add to that. And all of this has made the school year especially difficult for him and all other people working from home. There are even school nights when it's so loud, he sleeps in my room instead. Consider how this last year has been for you and your families. Your home has especially become a safe space for you guys to escape from everything that's going on outside of this. We all know that this year. A place to relax and distract yourself from what's going on outside of it. And I would really just like the same for my family. We don't eat dinner outside anymore. We stopped playing basketball outside to keep in mind how loud we might be because we respect this business and support it. And we're really just asking for the same. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Neville. I live on the corner of 20th and Lovejoy with my whole family. We have 3 children. Just to kind of point out some of the things, we are in the Alphabet District that is under a design review overlay, which means that any structural or anything built has to go through a review. I looked for the permits when the speakers were permitted, and I don't think they are. I think they're also illegal. They have never been permitted. A couple of things about the decibel that we're talking about with regards to the heater. Yes, it's 59, but they're allowing sound decibels of 55 for the the speakers. And mind you, there are 10 portable heaters, one for each table. I don't know if you've ever been camping, you know, you're cooking in the morning, you light that Coleman lamp, that sound that it makes. Consider that that's a small lamp. Imagine what it would be like if it was a heating system that's being used in this establishment. Mind you, to see the carbon monoxide detector that's being hoisted. Again, we're surrounded by buildings. One of the things that the tented area does is it literally amplifies the noise. If you know, sometimes people would take their iPhone that they're playing music and they put it on a bowl or a glass to amplify the sound. That's what it's like when the noise is up. The other thing is when Paul tested the sound, the noise using the Brill Hager, I asked him when it was last calibrated. He said it was last calibrated in 2017. According to the manufacturer, it should be calibrated every year. We don't know the accuracy of the readings at this point. Lastly, Vanessa said that she didn't know about getting permits. Well, I can tell you that I've attended some of the clam bakes that she's had, where she's had events permit and noise permits during their anniversaries, and it was wonderful. It's a great place. Also, Cafe Nail went through a design review approval in 2008 for signage. However, there are several outstanding violations with open complaints. A sidewalk cafe from 2009 that's still open, window replacement that's still open from 2011. The restaurant's non-conforming use does not allow expansion from the sidewalk, and any changes architectural design style, including the lean-tos, are not permitted and need to go to design review, including those speakers. They're not legal, they're illegal. There are 4 other open complaints for noise back from 2014. And those are just the ones in Portland, Mass. We don't know what else is out there because not all the complaints are published. Why haven't this been resolved? Again, you know, here's the thing. We have single family homes here. We have a women's shelter, kitty corner. Our house was the Raphael house. It was a women's shelter. We have affordable housing right next door, Section 8 folks. People in our neighborhood, they don't go next door. They can't even afford it. And dealing with the noise and the traffic. And what we're asking is just a minor, you know, there's a complaint about the legality of the site that apparently the commissions are going to look at this ordinance. But what I want you guys to see is the cause and impact of the community, right? Talk about in his variance about cultural asset. What culture? I can tell you that the folks that attend that are not the folks in your neighborhood. They're all from somewhere else. They don't live here and deal with the mess. People leave. The owner of the restaurant go home somewhere else. The employees go somewhere else. And what we're asking is just, you know, we're trying to live through COVID too with our kids. We all work from home, go to school, and just afford us this respect about each other and the fact that this thing is not permitted. Who's to say that if you grant this, that because the track record doesn't show it, the integrity about the restaurant violating these codes have been there. Just look at Portland maps. So I'm concerned as a father and somebody that's been here for over 20 years. And kids that are dealing with getting bullied at school, you know, because they fly the rainbow flag. We no longer go to the Catholic school because we don't support their belief. That's what we're dealing with.
Thank you. There I am. Thank you. Appreciate all three of your testimony. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for making your case. We appreciate it very much when people come and speak in their own words and share directly with the council. It takes a degree of courage, and I appreciate it, and I want you to know that. Thank you. Do we have other folks signed up, Keelan?
Yes, we do have others signed up, both in support and opposition of the appeal.
Okay, so not having any clear direction on this, why don't we start with people? Well, is there a preferred order to this from legal counsel?
Mayor Wheeler, this is Tony Garcia. Can you hear me better this time?
Yep. Yeah, you sound great now. Thanks, Tony.
So code doesn't prescribe for public testimony. So I'd say that discretion again lies with council whether to allow it or not and what parameters to put on there if there's a cap on time. Also considering the amount of time for the hearing that's allotted as well. So that's one way of saying just it's up to you.
How many people are signed up?
We have 5 people signed up.
All right, well, let's do this. They're here. They've taken the time. They have an opinion. Let's hear their opinions. 3 minutes each, name for the record. Let's start with people who support the appeal. And by that, I mean people who disagree with the noise control officer and agree generally with the arguments that the Mercados have just made. Why don't we hear from them first? Then we'll hear from people who oppose the appeal second. I want to put an admonition out there that's in the chat. Those of us on the city council can see this is very narrowly tailored to the issue of the noise ordinance. This is not about zoning. Zoning is a whole different kettle of fish. That is handled elsewhere. This is specifically related to Title 18 of the noise ordinance. What we are being advised is that as an appeals body, this is an opportunity to correct errors or misapplications of code, rules, or procedures. In this circumstance, the noise office's discretion for the variance. This hearing is his opportunity to explain his rationale for his decision along with the application of the noise code rules and policies. The appellant, as well as the variance holder, have their opportunity to respond to this decision. But to be clear, we have to keep this narrowly tailored on the noise code because this is a hearing specific to Title 18. So I want to put all that technical gobbledygook on the table so we're clear about the parameters that the council needs to use to make a decision. So first, let's call on those who are supportive of the appeal.
First up, we have Cameron McCune.
Welcome. 3 minutes, name for the record, please.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Perfect. Yeah, Cameron McEwen. First of all, appreciate you guys, having me here. I wasn't exactly anticipating such an esteemed crew such as yourself at the council there. Ted Wheeler, I guess you felt the same, so that makes me feel a little better. But yeah, basically, I
don't know how esteemed I am, but I'm here.
in my eyes. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to come and talk because I was born and raised in the neighborhood, and there's been multiple restaurants there, and it hasn't been too bad ever. But I mean, the noise out at Cafe Nell, it's a little much for me, what I think. I was raised there with me and my 2 little sisters, and my mom, and my sisters, as Sophia Mercado was saying, they do online school. They're both in high school, and they have a hard time, concentrating with the people back there. I mean, when people, drink, they get a little rowdy, of course, and I don't know if there's really a need for more speakers. I mean, there's already plenty of noise going on. I was actually there last Sunday. I got like a little clip I can play for you guys. I don't know if you guys need to hear that, but do it anyhow. Can you guys hear that? yeah, pretty much just goes on like that for a while. That was there Sunday. I go over to my mom's place. I don't actually live there, but I visit quite frequently now, so we can enjoy dinner and whatnot. And, spring coming around, we used to be able to have dinner out back and whatnot, but now it's kind of getting loud. And, I enjoy people, and I'm all for small business, and I'm all for that. And I don't want to see Vanessa or anything like that, fall short. But I don't know how long this is supposed to go for. And it's already pretty loud, so I don't know if there's anything to be added. I'm just worried about the livability of my family home, pretty much. And yeah, that's really all I have to say on it. Yeah, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
Next up, we have Lauren Mckinney.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you sound good.
Thank you. My name is Laura McKinney, and I am a Portland City resident. Thank you to the commissioners and the mayor for the time to speak today. I'm speaking in support of the Mercado's appeal of the variance. And to the mayor's point about forum, I'd like to emphasize the larger context of noise enforcement. You guys have all heard that, like boom, boom, boom on the sidewalk. The bass is intrusive, and then the car moves away and your heart rate goes back to normal and you can relax and have a conversation again. That's fine, but if that sound is always there in your home and it's inescapable, it truly becomes a quality of life issue, that quiet, that peace. And so for me, like good air, parks, walkable neighborhoods, accessible grocery stores, and all of the other carefully designed and maintained aspects that you as the council and the mayor do for us to make Portland the livable city it is, none of that happens accidentally. And all of the leadership you do in investment in green spaces and preservation of historic sites, planning of transportation, each of these requires years of commitment and intention to what I'm calling the small tugs, the ones that for each little tug to make a small concession leads you down the path to total compromise. So this example of the Mercados is just one of those small tugs. If we cannot be in our homes reliably without sufficient quiet, our homes become places of stress. And if we don't protect each home, then we won't in the end be protecting the quality of life for all of us. And I think that's something important for our city and future residents. At one time, I'm aware that Portland had a premier noise control program. We're the best in the nation. So where is this now? Is it possible that we may be taking what we established in our quiet for granted? Do we have sufficient attention, including the code and the appeals process, to support noise control? Delay is almost as good as denial when you let these linger on. So as our density increases, which is something we need, and the potential for stressful noise goes up, I'm worried that the increase in pressure for variances here and in other parts of the city, coupled with the significant decrease in attention and care for noise, will turn Portland from peaceful to relentlessly stressful for some significant portion of our population. Will these high density areas and the citizens be able to maintain quality of life with respect to noise? Especially if the zoning is not supportive or reflective of the majority of the use of these neighborhoods. So for me, those of us that are making the commitment to live in high density in the midst of many others, we are at risk. So this is an equity as well as an environmental issue. So please hold the line on this small tug because it's just a path to a larger compromise. Thank you again for your attention and consideration and for letting us citizens speak up.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Next up, we have Angelo Mercado.
Welcome.
That's actually my younger brother, but he's in school right now, so he couldn't attend.
He's upstairs.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next, then we have Jennifer Kaiser.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Kaiser. I basically live on the other side of Cafe Nell on Lovejoy. And so I hear, I'm an essential worker, so I'm going out of my house and then I'm coming home to the noise. Unfortunately, there's people parking in the parking lots behind my apartment, noise that happens, stereos blasting, chatter. then I know right when the restaurant closes, because there's this dragging noise that happens every night. And then at 4 or 5 in the morning, I'm woken by the garbage being picked up. And this is constant. So, you know, it speaks to what Laura is talking about, or talked about, is you want to come home and you want to enjoy the quiet of your home. There is not that with the buzz and all the other spillover that is happening with Cafe Nell. And I'm really anxious about the summer. I'm not going to be able to open my windows at night and when it gets warm and be able to enjoy that, you know, the breeze. I'm instead needing to shut out the noise that will be coming in if additional speakers are added. So thank you for listening and, you know, getting community input, because it does in fact impact everyone around. And especially when it's people who are not, that live in the neighborhood are coming to the restaurant. So they'll be able to walk away from it and leave their trash, make noise as they stumble into their car. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, that completes testimony for supporters.
All right.
Next.
Now we'll hear from people who support the hearings officer.
Next up, we have Jen Bressler.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. There's a couple of things I wanted to say, but basically, I have the same question the mayor had. This seems like a huge waste of time. I can't believe this is even happening. It's listening to that lawyer prattle on for like 20 minutes. Felt like I lost brain cells. I live in the neighborhood too. Never once heard any noise from that cafe. Sorry, it's hard to express how idiotic this whole thing is to me. But basically, I'm totally against it. Leave Cafe Nell alone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Joseph Krebs.
Welcome, Joseph.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you sound good.
Fantastic, thank you. Hello, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners Ryan, Rubio, Maps, and the most esteemed Commissioner Hardesty, wherever she may be. I've never been to one of these meetings as I'm a pretty laid back person, but I felt compelled to come and see what this fuss was about. After seeing flyers plastered all over the neighborhood, besmirching a longtime fixture of our neighborhood in Cafe Nell, I'm just here to say that I stand with Cafe Nell, as they are hardworking people doing hard work in a hard time, bringing back a sense of community in a time when we need that more than almost anything. Of all the things I could imagine complaining about today, that people are able to meet one another, to gather for a meal with those that they love, is certainly not one of them. I've eaten there recently, and there was some noise, but it's a restaurant, and it was quiet enough to chat with my partner in a near whisper for over the period of an hour. I am honestly appalled that anybody, especially someone who isn't a native to this city, would hire an attorney to attack a small business. Small businesses have been under assault in this city for over a year, especially downtown. And this is just one more assault on the men and women who are trying to bring some normalcy back to our city. That the precious time and energy of so many city officials is being spent on a noise variance appeal is frankly offensive to me. This is painting a crystal clear portrait of privilege run wild. They live in a $6 million home roughly. I'm sorry, but I live very close to you. And they probably step over 2 homeless people on the way to their Tesla. I just feel like this has brought shame to our city today by acting as if it revolves entirely around you. And if this is what, a lot of people think is a valuable utilization of city resources, I would just ask that they take a hard look in the mirror, or better yet, look at the people freezing in the streets or overdosing in our parks or getting shot in our neighborhoods. It has been 45 days since somebody in the police administration of this city leaked false information about our commissioner, deepening the social wounds that they should be working harder to heal. and somehow that can't be dealt with in a timely manner. But this family can terrorize a small business and vandalize the neighborhood with flyers calling for people to join this Zoom session and complain about Cafe Nell, and it just sucks. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for the family, and I feel terribly sorry for Cafe Nell. I sincerely hope that the Mercado family can maybe just take a look at how privileged you seem to be and just ask, why it's so important that like your needs are met when the needs of so many others, never get the time of day, or never get an audience of every city commissioner and the mayor. And I just feel like this is something that could have been dealt with by maybe talking to Cafe Nell or like through some other chain of command. And like, I'm really not trying to be a jerk, and I apologize for like, taking a stance against, you guys are people and you live here too, but it's just a lot when there's a lot going on in a city with a lot of people. And I thank you for your time, and I wish you all safety and a great day. And yeah, just thank you.
Thank you.
And that completes testimony.
All right, good. Colleagues, what do you want to do? Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I would move that we uphold the decision of the noise officer.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Ryan. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I want to thank the family, the Mercado family, for being here this afternoon, and for all the people that came to testify. I also want to thank Paul Van Orden for his good work. You must do a lot of great work, since this is the first ordinance, noise ordinance, that's been to the council in at least in the mayor's tenure. I think I will definitely vote yes on this. And it's also, I just want to give a suggestion. It sounds like the owner, Vanessa Preston, nice to see you. It sounds like you're in good faith of wanting to continue to have communication with your neighbors. And I really liked when the mayor mentioned mediation, and I just hope that you all continue to communicate with one another. We are in unprecedented times. We heard that from everybody. And I think small restaurants, especially the hospitality industry, has definitely been targeted as the most challenging of all the businesses to stay intact. So the fact that you've been creative and persistent to figure out how to keep your employees on payroll in a city that is known for being a foodie city and being a city that appeals to folks that want to come to an establishment such as Cafe Nell. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa, for being resilient and figuring out how to stay open during this time. And I definitely heard what the family had said, and I just have faith that you're all going to work this out. And most importantly, people keep getting vaccinated so that we can get some herd immunity, and we can have your inside open again. And anyway, so I just hope that together we can continue to be creative and help our businesses and their neighbors thrive and actually work together during these unprecedented times. We've had a lot of discussions today about shared sacrifice and how none of us are experiencing anything that's been normal of late. And I just hope that we can continue to lean in to that spirit as Portlanders. And so I do vote aye to uphold the noise officer's decision. Thanks.
Hardesty.
I want to thank the Mercado family for coming and making their case here today. As was stated, however, we are asked to make a decision that's very narrowly focused. It's on whether or not the noise officer made the appropriate decision when he granted the variance. As has been already said, we are still in a pandemic, and we as city as city of Portland, are trying to do all we can to help resident restaurants stay in business. As we know, the governor just announced we're going back to no longer having indoor seating. We've been on that rodeo for a year, and which means that all of us are being impacted, whether we're an employee of a restaurant, and thank goodness there are 30 people still employed at Cafe Now, and have been employed throughout the entire pandemic. Many restaurants can't say that. This is about noise. A good decision was made. And it's clear that the decision would have been probably the same without the pandemic, with some exceptions. So I feel confident in supporting the decision of the noise officer. I understand that families are being impacted, and I would encourage us to look for common ground. I believe that Cafe Now is willing to work with neighbors to help mitigate some of what happens when a restaurant closes. But we have to all understand that all of our lives have been permanently impacted by a pandemic. And I hope that the best of us comes out during these times and not the worst of us. I vote aye.
Maps.
Thank you. And like my colleagues, I'd like to express my appreciation for the Mercado family for bringing this issue before us. I'm sympathetic to your plight and the plight of the neighbors who are frustrated by the noise that comes from Cafe Nell. Many of the issues that were brought up today strike me as being fundamentally land use issues, which maybe deserve some attention, but that is not what we are here today to do. Instead, we are focused on a very narrow issue around whether or not the noise control officer made the right call here. And I have seen no evidence today that the noise officer everything I've seen suggests the noise officer is in complete compliance with the rules. I'm also moved by the fact that this variance expires at the end of this week. And like my colleagues, I do hope that this is a situation that the neighbors and the restaurants can work together to figure out how to live together. Because indeed, at a time of economic crisis and a pandemic, if we're going to get through this, we really do have to communicate effectively and figure out how to be good neighbors to each other. I can tell that you all are all great people who love your neighborhood. I want to support you in that. But today I am going to support the noise officer's ruling. So I vote aye.
Rubio.
I appreciate the discussion today and also acknowledge, like my colleagues, the challenging times that we're all living in. It's not an easy time for small businesses and residents alike. And I appreciate that both the Mercado's presence and Ms. Preston's presence are here today. And I also want to appreciate Paul Van Orden. Thank you for your thoughtfulness and leading with an equitable lens when people's work and livelihood is at stake. All these things really matter in these kinds of decisions. And to echo my colleagues, our role here is very, very narrow. It's to decide about if the variance is in accordance with the law. And to me, it appears that the owner has made good faith efforts to do what's required in these uncommon times. And I really too hope, along with my colleagues' words as well, that there is a mediated resolution or conversations that can be found outside of this forum. It seems that everyone here is aligned and caring very deeply about this neighborhood and the ecosystem that makes it vibrant. So based on what I've heard and in reviewing the documents shared with our offices, I'm compelled to uphold the noise variance issued by the city to Cafe Now. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I also want to thank the Mercado family. And I hope your attorney told you, and I'm sure he did, that this was going to be an uphill battle based on the code itself. And as has been indicated, the code is somewhat antiquated and it is somewhat vague. And therefore, that gives the noise control officer a degree of latitude. And so our question today is, Did he appropriately interpret the code, Title 18, in making his decisions? I have seen no evidence to suggest that he did not. I will also acknowledge the shortcomings of that code. So I support the decision made by the noise control officer. Paul, I think there's an underlying unrelated message here that you are probably overtasked. You do a fantastic job on an extremely limited budget and limited resources for a city this size. I think people on both sides of this issue indicated that may be the case. And I also thought I heard a hint in there somewhere that maybe some of this code needs to be looked at and updated with the reality that we're going to probably see more of these types of disputes as we move to be more of an outdoor society. I want to say I'm very sympathetic to some of the arguments that the Mercado family made. They're not particularly germane to the specific question that was before the council, unfortunately for them, but I'm sympathetic nonetheless to their desire to have a sanctuary in their home. And I get that. And I do hope that there are opportunities for the family and others who are concerned to work with Vanessa and her team. I agree with my colleagues that I believe they would be very open to those kinds of conversations. Maybe the noise can be turned down later, or can be turned off sooner, or the speakers can be faced a different way, or there's probably the mats that are being dragged outside at closing. I don't know what that's all about. It's been years since I was a dishwasher, but maybe some of that could be changed, or maybe the trash pickup that's also not directly related to this issue, that could be changed. So maybe there's some package of compromises that can collectively be reached that would enable everybody to be able to get along under these very, very trying circumstances, both for our households as well as our small businesses. Vanessa, I want to thank you for your leadership during a very difficult time. A lot of our restaurants were not able to make a go during COVID. You were very innovative, very creative. You tacked quickly. As soon as the initial restrictions were put into place, by all accounts, we've done well. For the record, I have dined at Cafe Nell, not recently. My problem there isn't noise. It's when I make a reservation for 2, 15 tend to show up. And so I've sort of moved on to takeout and learning to cook at home. But I want to thank you for the work you're doing to be flexible during this pandemic, keep your operations running, keeping our residents employed, continuing to keep resources in our local economy at a time when it's desperately needed. And it's not really my place to call on you to ask you to do anything, but I'm just imploring you from one person to another. Let's see if we can work with your neighbors and see if there aren't some compromises that could be struck in good faith and alleviate some of this conflict that currently exists in the community. But with that, I do vote aye. I do support the noise ordinance officer's decision, given the framework that has been provided here during this hearing. And the motion as moved by Commissioner Hardesty passes. I do have a question of legal counsel. Under typical hearings like this, it's a tentative vote. Is this a tentative vote? Is this a permanent vote? What is this?
This is not a tentative vote. It's a final vote, and the parameters are for the board, for the council to either affirm, reverse, modify, or remand the decision. And the council, as I understand it, has voted unanimously to affirm the decision of the correct noise control officer.
That is correct. Does that complete our business then here?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for everybody who testified and gave your perspective. It was a good conversation. We are adjourned. Thank you all.